of time and space. Everywhere and anywhere, every star that ever was. Where do you want to start?
Hello listeners and welcome back to All of Time and Space, coming to you from Colchester Town Centre at chucking out time on a Friday night after the football, and it's time to talk to you about The Savages. I'm Ian.
And I'm Mark. So let's catch up with where we are in the story. Landing on a distant planet, the Doctor confidently announces to his companions that the TARDIS has brought them to an age of great advancement, peace and prosperity. The Doctor's calculations seem to be confirmed when the travellers are greeted by Jano and the Elders, who take them on a tour of their city, a haven of beauty, harmony and friendship, set in a wilderness inhabited by tribes of savages. But the security of the city is founded on one deadly and appalling secret. Soon the Doctor and his friends discover that it is not only outside the city walls that savages dwell. And we'll be back after this.
Oh, that ridiculous young man. He thought I'd made a mistake.
He is coming. What's he carrying?
It is not a light gun.
He is one of the leaders.
It is not one of our people.
He is coming near. We must run.
Stay. We kill this man.
Hello there. I say, come out from underneath there. Now, don't be alarmed. Come along.
Now.
Look. Can you hear me? Oh, I say, do come out from underneath there, will you? Oh, good gracious me. You know, I thought for one moment you were hiding behind those bushes.
I've come to welcome you.
This is a great honor to have you visit our planet.
Oh, yes, I see. Well, I am expected. Do you know who I am?
Not your name, of course, but our space observers have their own name for you.
Oh, and what might that be?
You are known to us as the traveller from beyond time.
I see, and how would you expect me here and now?
The elders of our city have been plotting the course of your space-time ship for many light years. They estimated your arrival some time ago.
I see, yes, well, that's very clever of them.
What is this? We understood from our elders that you did not carry weapons.
Oh, yes, they're quite right. Yes, I never do, no. This is my RV, you see. This is my reacting vibrator. I'm able to do my calculations from this. As I told my young friends...
You're not alone?
Good gracious, no. Did you expect me to be?
We've had no information about your companions.
Oh, they're very pleasant, yes. They're both very pleasant, apart from their juvenile exuberance. Yes, I'm sure you'll like them. They must be at the back here somewhere. I think they're rather worried because I'm a bit late joining them.
We had no instructions about them. The elders must be informed. You must come with us.
I must?
Captain Adal wishes to take you to the elders of our city. They are waiting to welcome you.
Oh, yes, of course. Yes. I shall come with you. Meantime, young man, I wonder if you'd mind trying to find my young people for me, Stephen and Dodo. Tell them the Doctor sent you.
Go for the next horse. Bring them to the city. This way.
And welcome back. And I'm very pleased to say we've been joined by friend of the show, the good Doctor himself, Matt Barber. Hello, Matt.
Hello.
Wow, he's so thrilled to be back.
Do you want me to expand on that?
You did sound faintly underwhelmed, and I'm wondering if the listeners might feel a bit, I
was trying to decide.
Just give.
They're used to a certain level of quality from you, Matt, and I think they're feeling slightly shortchanged.
I tell you where my pause came from, because you described me as a friend of the show, and I briefly thought, well, sometimes that's when you've financially contributed rather than just been on. And then I was worried that I might have accidentally financially contributed towards the podcast.
Don't worry, there's no danger of that.
And I got a little bit freaked out.
It can also mean you're an absolute tart and you just appear as at the opening of a packet of crisps, you'll be there.
Yeah, opening of a packet of crisps or review of the Savages or the Space Museum.
Yes.
I'm definitely the go-to.
We pick all the best ones for you, Matt.
The go-to guy that you go to.
Yeah.
When you don't have to do the lure of a Dalek story.
Don't worry, when we get to season 22, you'll be first in line for the time lash.
Which actually, Mark,
yes,
brings me brings up an item I had on my agenda.
Not the mind probe.
No, not the mind probe, because I'm guessing, Mr. Cockram, that you still haven't bothered to fix.
It's not a case of haven't bothered. It's more a case of, obviously things will have moved on and hopefully improved by the time this episode actually goes out. But we're currently in the grip of a problem where it's very difficult to get things into the country because...
Oh, don't go blaming international logistical shortages on... We have been recording
I was kind of hoping to
season 3 of Doctor Who since about 1982.
It does feel a bit like that.
And you I bought that in good faith. It was 40 quid from Phoenix. That was my money. I bought it so that this podcast would have a bit of a gimmick at the start. And you've done nothing about it.
Well, I mean, I fitted that really swanky 8-track cartridge player.
Yeah, and that's worked, hasn't it? It's
I mean that was the cause of the fault on the time lash, but it'll be fine. I'm sure it'll work itself out.
I can't even replace the tinsel because I haven't got the right doodah.
I mean, what's the point? Really, what's the point? We get all these guests on and we've got no quiz for them. I'm just
you can't
sat
probe
here
them
like a fool.
Yeah.
Oh man.
I mean, I'm quite impressed by the skit. Like this improvised performance you've got.
Skit.
It's like a sort of John Nathan Turner pantomime level of performance that you've got going. Particularly when Ian did.
And Matt, you are Gary Downey.
Ian did his Mr. Punch voice. That was really convincing. I felt my bladder turn to ice at that point because I thought
that actually is his normal voice. It's the other voice you hear all the time is his put on voice.
Yeah, I try and sound more cultured and deep. So so I'm not doing any more of mind probe until you fix the bloody thing.
Okay. Oh, all right. Fair enough.
Does that mean I don't get questions about museums and lifts this week?
You're going to...
Yes, it does. It means there will be no more questions.
Ian, just know that you'll be disappointing our listeners. That's all I'm going to say.
I'm not the one who poured a cup of tea into the time lash and broke it and invalidated it.
Neither am I. Look, I just happened to put in the best of Chicory Tip into the 8-track player. A bit of tinsel got jammed in there, and it's never been quite the same since.
All right, I'm going to give you one last chance. I want you to fix it for next time, or I quit. It's that simple.
Oh,
it's that easy.
Oh, what are you going to do? Leave the country?
Yes, I am.
Oh.
Yes, I am. Somehow.
Oh, that's rather backfired. Oh dear. Matt.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Oh.
Please dig me out of this hole.
You want me to replace Ian?
Can we move the subject on, please? You
want me?
You've been on nearly as many times as Ian.
You want me to continue watching Hartnell forensically slowly?
Well, we've only got 3 more stories to go.
I mean, you're almost... Well, I was going to say you're almost out of the Reconstruction era, aren't you? You're almost at the point where it's mostly animated episodes or live episodes.
Yeah, thanks to those lovely people animating the 60s stuff that's gone missing. It should hopefully make the experience a bit more easy.
Yeah, until episode 3 of Web of Fear.
Oh, God.
Which I applaud. Which was... I genuinely applaud the effort, and I thought it was groundbreaking and inventive. But it didn't work for me.
Well, it's doubly sad for the people who worked on it because they put out the Evil of the Daleks animation very soon afterwards, which unfortunately puts it even more into the shade, which is,
that's such good.
Not very helpful.
That was actually a good animation, Evil of the Daleks animation.
Well, let's keep our powder dry on that one.
Oh, okay. Oh, are you sure?
Because
you don't want to talk about Evil of the Daleks right now.
No, we're going to talk about something much better than that, Matthew.
Okay.
We can't put it off any longer. We're gonna have to talk about the Savages.
Okay.
So we'll do the usual. Ian,
Good evening.
How many times have you experienced this story? Did you have the Target novel as a kid? I bet you did.
No, I didn't actually. I had a very patchy clutch of Hartnells. I think I maybe about 12 or 13 in total.
That sounds quite painful.
Well, yes. So this is not a story I knew at all before this week.
Okay.
I have managed to avoid ever, well, it's not like I managed to avoid seeing it because for reasons we will come to.
It doesn't exist.
It's not really on the table.
Yeah.
I've, for some reason, as a teenager, I never felt the need to buy a kind of audio version or anything. So, this week has been my first and to date only experience of this story.
And Matt, this was one of the ones that you were saving for best that you hadn't seen before.
Saving for best isn't quite the term. This is one of the ones like Ian. I didn't have the novel. Obviously, there wasn't a video or DVD.
Yeah.
So, and I didn't get the audio. So this was one of the ones that happened to be. I just hadn't got round to doing it, so I decided not to do it.
Because you have said before, you've got a few stories that because you like to have like a little batch of stories that you've never seen, just so you've got that sort of thing to come back to.
It's down to one now, I think.
So Matt, I've been thinking about your predicament, and I have a solution.
Okay.
Oh.
If you don't watch Doctor Who Flux, then you'll have another 6 stories that you've never seen.
Oh, yeah.
I know.
Well, one story in 6 parts.
As tempting as that is, I'm expected to review it on another rival podcast over the course of over the course of 6 weeks. So I could not watch it, and I could just see how far I could get, just talking about
just winging it.
Yeah. I would contribute £10 per episode if you tried to wing it, having not watched it.
It's what I would call
would make for excellent listening.
It's what I would call the Rawlings manoeuvre, where I just talk about it without really, it would be like, that would make the Australians really cross. I mean, Rob Irwin would get very cross with me if I didn't prepare.
Anyway, back to the subject of the Savages. So this one I had heard on audio before. I never read the Target novel. I think I had seen the Recon. Now, Ian, you discovered a rather unusual reconstruction for this one.
So on a website there are.
Let's call it Mailey-Dotion.
Let's do that thing on Mailey-Dotion.
Let's call it the dark web.
It's not far off.
Yeah, thanks for those links, by the way, Matt. I found a really cute. So I found 2 episodes of it had been animated, and I don't want to be rude, but to a fairly basic and crude level.
In fairness, in the description, it does say that there are the limitations of the software they've used.
Absolutely,
tried their best
and I think it was great for what it was. I'm curious as to why they. Actually, I've just answered my own question in my head. Why they did the first 2 and then just thought, do you know what?
For those that haven't seen it, so you've got the original audio soundtrack, and then you've got the characters portrayed by. I can only really describe them as characters from Tekken 2 on the PlayStation.
So William Hartnell's hair is a lot more sort of 90s indie than it is swept back wig. Yeah. Stephen, didn't have the grandeur of the Purvis hair.
Well, no, I mean, they probably didn't have the pixels to handle that.
No one's screen is that big. And the sprite representing Dodo was...
Good Lord.
Well, I mean, I've now got a poster on my wall.
Yeah?
I've got a proper teenage crush again.
Did you find your life force being sucked from you watching that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was powerfully drained, and I spent about half an hour just sort of muttering incoherently in a corridor.
So tiring, isn't it?
See, now as tempting as it was to watch that version, to me it kind of distracted somewhat from the story itself, and I feel you get a slightly more representative experience if you watch the loose cannon reconstruction. So did you swap over to that once you got past episode 2?
I think I'm not sure who made them, but I did have to go to a more standard recon after that.
Yeah.
Seemingly made from about 6 photographs, which they would recycle over the remaining 50 minutes. So that was quite. But there were little tiny.
Little fragments
that I think must have been cut from the original tape somewhere.
I think what it was, having done a little bit of research, I know it's a first for the show.
Fix the time, but he's done some research.
All right. Yeah. So apparently a viewer in Australia had an 8mm film camera and filmed a few little seconds of footage here and there. So that's why you've got those existing little clips.
Oh.
Which is, slightly heartbreaking because it gives you just the briefest little glimpse of what it looks like, and then you're back to the photos again.
Yeah, I was about to say it's better than nothing, but honestly, I don't know if it is better than nothing because the clips are so short and infrequent that it again just distracts from the bulk of the experience, which is these crummy old photographs, and they don't really add anything. But it's great that we've got them, and it's something.
I'm going to let you into a bit of a secret. I rather like this story.
That's fine.
I'm just leaving space for the tumbleweed to go in.
I was going to say I watched it on the loose cannon reconstruction as well. But for me, I wanted to get a real feeling of what it would be like to watch it in its original state. So I watched it at the dentist's without anaesthetic. having my teeth pulled bloodily from my mouth. Actually, I didn't mind it.
Well,
that was the gunfighters, surely.
Having been in quite a bit of dental pain when we did our gunfighters review, I can slightly identify with that one.
Okay, so I didn't mind this one. I thought this one was okay.
Wow, damning with faint praise there. Well done.
It's better than the Space Museum.
Well, yes. I mean, the bar was set relatively low there. Yeah, I think it's a bit of a classic sci-fi concept, isn't it? You've got the so-called savages, who it appears were previously somewhat more sophisticated than they are now, but through years of being subjected to this process by the elites.
The elders spent generations sucking off the savages to get their life force.
And that's why they look so tired out all the time.
Yeah, and desiccated.
Yeah, well, yes.
That's the only joke I have about the savages.
Yeah.
And I will repeat it again.
Yeah.
Okay.
I look forward to that because that's going to be a highlight of this episode.
Yeah, I mean the Doctor did whip out his vibrator at the start of
so what was it called?
Episode, which
it was called the reactive vibrator.
They very quickly just turned it into RV. They just flipped to RV. But surely they must have. I mean, I know maybe the ladies' pleasure toys weren't called vibrators back then, but there must be some sort of like awareness of calling something the reactive vibrator. What did it do? The reactive vibrator? Did it just like vibrate?
I think it reacted and vibrated.
Yeah.
It went buzz when there's stuff.
Yeah. And it can download comics from the future.
I mean, yeah. So it's basically a sonic screwdriver.
Well,
basically, I think it's really interesting that this is something that was like, news to me and obviously news to you, and this item isn't already a sort of well-trodden fan joke. You'd assume there'd be like, there was probably a fanzine called The Reactive Vibrator knocking about in the late 80s or something.
No doubt.
Forget about that. Character Options would have produced one for Christmas and then flogged it to children.
Batteries not included.
You would have the
unexpectedly, it's the most popular toy this Christmas.
Yeah, the fault locator and the reactive vibrator would be like, they'd be minting it. Instead, they did the TARDIS tuner, which was a sort of a radio. And that was
that
it.
Like, Major Morgan or whatever it was,
And this story is a bit of an unusual one because it almost goes a bit meta, doesn't it? Because the elders have been watching Doctor Who's adventures, so they're aware of him, which is he's got a bit of notoriety, which is something we've never really come across before, is it?
But
although I suppose in the rescue, he had been to that planet before, hadn't he? But there was no. It wasn't like he was welcomed with open arms by the inhabitants because they'd all been bumped off by Coquillion. But it's a bit of an unusual.
The elders have been watching Doctor Who, but not very carefully, because the elders are quite open about the fact that they're sucking off the life force from the Zavagers, and they think, well, this is great, and the
Doctor's not going to stand for that.
The Doctor's going to approve of this because the Doctor's a scientist, so he'll be fine with this, judging by all the Doctor Who stories we've seen so far. And obviously, the Doctor's not going to be too happy with it. It's an obviously malevolent thing to do.
This is for us anyway, this is your first story with Stephen and Dodo. What do you make of them?
Stephen, I do quite like. I think Peter Purves is good. And possibly more likable here than he was in Blue Peter. I think he's almost more believable. I think his performance in Blue Peter was he felt more like Peter Purves here. I do like Peter Purves. I don't think this is his strongest. I don't think this is like a massive sort of Peter Purves. If he'd left at the end of whenever it was, the massacre, when he just could have stormed out angrily, I think that would be a more powerful one. Dodo is impossible to form an opinion on because she's in it so little, and she doesn't really have a fixed personality or character
or accent.
Because so little of her stuff exists, it's really hard to judge it from just the audio as well, which is a bit tricky.
And it's so tempting just to see her as a short-haired Vicky rather than anything really distinct. She sounded I thought she was a bit cross with Stephen at the beginning. There was like a sort of an Eric Sayward grade companion bickering in the first episode, which it's been a while since. So the story that precedes this is the Gunfighters. It's been a while since I saw that, but I can't remember them leaving the Wild West in a grump with one another. So something must have happened between the Gunfighters and this to have caused this bickering, because she's really down on Stephen.
Yeah, I mean, Dodo is... So this is her, third story? And there's been absolutely no effort to craft her any kind of backstory, character. She's just in that point in the series' evolution where it's just like, we have a young female companion, here she is, let's call her young female companion. Off you go and be the young female companion.
She gets to do a bit more in this one. But yeah, I know what you mean. It's kind of very much cookie cutter, generic.
I mean, to be fair, it always
really
was, I suppose, in the classic series, and it's not until we get to 2005 that they start pivoting to make the show more about the companion, if anything, than the Doctor.
So what was it about Vicky then, do we think, that made her... Well, certainly the three of us, I think, seem to find her more enjoyable to watch so far of the 60s companions.
As you say, it might just be because so much exists. And the stories that she's in, things like the Romans, is a genuinely pleasing story. She seems to have a chemistry with Hartnell. That's one thing, which might be because we can see it, but in the Romans, she's got more chemistry than Hartnell had with Susan. So she's more of a granddaughter to Hartnell, to the Doctor than Susan was, really, I think.
And I think
I miss Chesterton, obviously.
Shut up. Vicky just seemed more sort of engaged and more keen to be in the stories and more keen to explore and like, oh, we're in ancient Rome, how fantastic. Whereas I think every other one of the young female companions has not really had that, the option to do that. They've just been very much, I will now walk over here, I will say this line, I will now get captured. So I feel like it really wouldn't have taken much. I mean, 2 or 3 lines of dialogue here and there, And
no, it's a shame because I think she's pretty good, and I think given a bit more to work with, she could have been a real standout companion.
I mean,
Just...
she was very good in The Gunfighters, so we know the actress has got the chops for it. But she was just, to this point, I would say uniquely badly served.
Well, I hope she sticks around a lot longer, and hopefully we'll see that come to fruition.
There's a hindsight thing to this as well, because you guys don't know because you haven't got that far. But the production team are in a sort of it's an EastEnders Coronation Street level massacre of the.
It's a bit of a revolving door, isn't it?
Well, yeah, like they're racing. Basically, they've got Jamie at the end of the long end of a corridor, and they're racing towards Jamie as fast as possible. But they have to get through these companions in the meantime. And I think with the knowledge that that's the case, that Stephen's going in this one, and Dodo's not going to be far behind him, she isn't that well served, and you know that she's not going to be that well served if she's stuck around. For Troughton, maybe that's when she would have shined. Maybe that's she would have had to have changed her hairstyle because from behind she and Troughton would be indistinguishable.
And Jamie as well.
And Jamie, it would be basically 3 of the 4 Beatles if they're not careful. But yeah, she just feels having all the stories.
John, Paul, George, and Dodo.
She just feels like a sort of a temporary replacement for Vicky until they, move on to the next era of Doctor Who.
A placeholder, which is a bit of a shame, really. So what did we think of the story in this one? It's quite a sort of a sci-fi effort, because we've had 1 or 2 more sort of... Because Doctor Who, it tends to be quite a more of a fantasy series, but this is very much something I could imagine appearing in an episode of Star Trek.
And it feels really generic. This feels like the kind of Doctor Who that people imagined Doctor Who was, but wasn't often. So quarries and a sort of a dry kind of science fiction parable. But it didn't happen that often. So this is the thing that the Mark Gatiss riffed on, or one of the things that Mark Gatiss riffed on in his Doctor Who sketch from the, I don't know, the 40th anniversary or whenever it was. Quarry, no monsters, 2 sets of sort of humanoid kind of antagonists, one of which is preying on the other, and the Doctor kind of mediates between the 2. But actually, I think it's quite original at this point.
Yeah, well, this is Ian Stuart-Black's first story for the show, isn't it?
Yeah, and he does this sort of, as you'll discover later on, he does do kind of science fiction parables quite well, but he does them with slightly more texture or slightly more excitement in later stories. But this one was okay, but it did have that kind of Space Museum sort of, almost as if presenting these events is enough for drama, which it isn't really enough. It's quite, you can see where it's going. The main surprise in it is there's not that many. The main surprise is that they actually agree at the end. There's no battle or fight in the end, really.
Yeah.
There's just a sort of an acceptance. Oh my God, you're right. We were doing the wrong thing. We must amend our ways. And the other exciting thing is Frederick Jaeger sucks the life force out of the Doctor and starts doing a William Hartnell impression. Another example in this sort of era of how are we going to replace Hartnell? We could make him invisible. We could get Frederick Jaeger to play him. We could just rearrange his face.
Can you imagine the next season starting with Frederick Jaeger as the Doctor with his... I mean, what was going on with the makeup in this? Was he supposed to be like a goldy silvery colour, or
they were in blackface?
I don't know. I really don't know.
Ian might know because he saw the classy animation that clearly really went for realism. But I think they were definitely blackface, weren't they?
It looked weird. It looked metallic almost.
I mean,
it's very strange.
I think it was a sort of a joke, wasn't it? That the savages were all really pale and Caucasian looking, and the intelligent but malevolent elders were all in blackface.
So there was a working title for this story that was going to be called The White Savages, which I think shows you exactly where it was going and how bad that would have been. We didn't get that, and obviously, in the animation, you didn't get whatever visual thing they were trying to do.
It would be amazing if they had gone there.
But I was waiting for Yoshimitsu to turn up, but never happened.
So I mean, my serious point was about Freddy Jaeger, or the Jägermeister as we'll call him from now on. Was he halfway towards being the new Doctor? Was there a plan behind the scenes to keep him?
It does seem to be. I mean, you hear all these rumours about, because obviously we've broached before where in the Celestial Toymaker there was an idea that he would disappear and then come back as a different actor, but that got nixed. Allegedly, we don't know. I don't know. It'd be nice to see this really sort of addressed, but I'm guessing probably a lot of the people who were involved in those decisions are probably not with us anymore.
You're running out. You've got Peter Purves, basically, to ask.
Yeah.
I'm less convinced. So that I always assumed that, or I liked to assume that this was a series of running attempts by the producers to just experiment and find different ways. Having listened to or sort of watched The Savages, I'm less convinced that The Savages was an example of that this time. I don't know why though, because he was in blackface, and I know that there was a suggestion by Troughton that Troughton could black up for the character, which I mean, he decided not to do it, and that's his call. It would have been a take, but I just can't see Jano, Frederick Jaeger's character, kind of continuing beyond this story. It's too minor a story. It's too
I don't know. I go more Occam's razor, and in the middle of this run of stories where they are trying all these different approaches to recast the lead, this is yet another example. Are they coincidentally doing in this story what they've consciously tried to do in the 3 previous stories? I mean, I don't know.
But I think the Occam's razor is probably it wasn't them trying out different things. I think that's what I like to think. But the more likely idea is Hartnell needed lots of holiday. That's sort of in the Celestial Toymaker, Hartnell needed an episode off, so he just recorded his voice. Hartnell needed to disappear here. Ironically here, Jano sucks Hartnell's life force out of him, and Hartnell is still there on screen, just doing a bit of floppy acting. So that's not the case
terrible
here.
When you went, so what you're saying is that after the sucking, he went floppy.
Well, yeah, and sort of dried out and
sort
tired.
of like a husk.
Yeah, he had to have a lie down. But I think a lot of these things are designed by twists and concepts designed by the writers and directors to give Hartnell some rest, to allow Hartnell to lie down for a bit, because you see it in the 10th Planet as well. Throughout the 10th Planet, he spends a lot of time in bed, basically. So I don't think they'd have that level of kind of planning to try out things without.
I mean, it would have been the ultimate irony if William Hartnell had been replaced by the actor who played Jamaica in The Smugglers in season 4. I would have loved to have seen the reaction.
I mean, just going back to the racial politics of this, am I wrong? But calling it the White Savages and flipping the races over, that would be their attempt at making it more palatable, because they think, right, we could be racist here, let's avoid this at all costs and flip it. But in doing so, they managed to be even more racist and worse, because the bad guys are then blacking up. And Just checking.
So they're not even getting black actors; they're getting white actors in blackface. It would have been cancelled. Certainly now, but probably then as well. What a shambles! I find it interesting. So this is. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is Ian Stuart-Black's first story for Doctor Who.
Yes, that's right.
And then he goes straight on to write another one.
Yes, he writes the next story.
I wonder.
Spoilers.
Yeah. Sorry, gentle listener, if you didn't know that, but but that's interesting, isn't it? Was it one of these things where they suddenly find a new writer and everyone else is kind of running on empty? So they go, right, we've got 8 more episodes. Can you do them? Can you give us a couple of stories here, or does anyone know?
So it's not the only time this has happened, is it?
No.
I have a name, and I think it happens with this writer. So this is like my time lash revenge. Do you know which other writer writes 2 consecutive stories? It might happen more than once.
Is it?
I'm thinking of who was it who wrote? Oh, Jamie Matheson.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was thinking more in the classic series, but Jamie.
But I don't know if they were they one after another though.
What?
I know he wrote one, and they were so happy
Orient
that
Express.
they came back with another one. Yeah.
So I'm thinking of Chris Boucher. Doing Face of Evil and Robots of Death.
And
I think at that point, I think wasn't he definitely? They definitely like tried him out and then thought this is really good. Or Robert Holmes thought, I don't have to rewrite this. Write another one quick. Because I need some time.
And then he got
off.
poached by Blake Seven.
Yeah, so that might be the same here. Maybe it's just if you get a firm pair of hands, a safe pair of hands. I suppose Pip and Jane Baker technically did it with Trial of the Time Lords Part 14 and Time in the Army, because they're a real safe pair of hands, guaranteed to turn out quality.
Or the only pair of hands.
Yeah, or the only pair of hands.
Yeah.
So that might be an explanation.
But I'm wondering if that was the case, then what was it in this story that made anyone think that, this kid's the future? Let's get him to write another one straight away, because this was amazing. Because that's possibly not the experience I took away from it.
But do we know if this wasn't amazing at the time? Because this is a different looking. I mean, it's filmed partly in a quarry and in caves.
Yeah.
And that's the first time they've really done that in Doctor Who. So even though this looks or feels like a 70s or 80s kind of something you get all the time in the 70s and 80s, you didn't get it all the time in the 60s. So a gravel
I know it's hard to
pit
tell
somewhere.
with recons because you're dealing with sort of stills and things, but I thought what I saw of the sets, they look very interesting.
Yeah.
They look like they'd used a bit of imagination with the design.
Yeah, and it had a bit more scale to it.
Well, this is the problem. I think, visually, it may well have been a complete treat, and there were parts of it that kind of did evoke that kind of Buck Rogers kind of adventure serial kind of excitement. But I think my wider point, and this stems because I was watching the animation where sort of crude placeholding background images and poorly fleshed out characters were stumbling about. It felt like the dialogue and the plot was assembled by the same kind of lazy analog. It was just good enough to move the story along, but as a plot, it wasn't terribly good.
I mean, I guess they employed Ian Stuart-Black for the War Machines before anybody had seen the Savages, so it wouldn't be they recruited him based
so
on
it's
the
not like
popularity.
they just finished filming and they're like, oh yeah, quick, just write a script on the back of this.
So maybe Ian Stuart-Black delivered something that was complete, filmable, and had something for everybody. And that at that point they said, "We'll keep on write 4 more, but we need it set in London."
Yeah, I mean, maybe that was it. Maybe he turned them in so quickly, everyone was impressed by his professionalism or something. I have no idea, but I mean, just in terms of spectacle, drama, excitement, and escapism. I don't feel that this story delivered any of those things.
But Dodo was very attractive in your version.
She was, yeah, she was in my animation. She is on my poster. Good lord. But yeah, I if I had to sum this up in one hyphenated expression, it would be half-arsed.
Yeah,
I'm starting to get the impression you're not so much of a fan of this one, Ian.
I find myself leaning that way, but it's so hard to quantify because, you know, as we've mentioned about 9 times, it's a missing story. We don't really know what it looked like. We don't really know. You can tell from the audio track that there is a certain amount of gusto in I think all the key roles. So perhaps it was brilliantly acted. Perhaps it was a kind of homage to that kind of 30s, 40s adventure serial kind of thing.
Yeah.
On the other hand, it could have been really bland and terrible, and we just don't know. So you kind of have to go with your gut and mine.
I think those little glimpses we get of Freddie Yeager, he seems to be having a lot of fun in the part.
Absolutely, he was he sounded great. In the 3 photographs that accompanied it, he looked, you know, like he was clutching his lapels, and I imagine he was, because getting to come into a show and sort of satirize the lead man is sort of, you know, just a huge treat.
While he's in the same room, floppy and incapacitated, just watching this guy mimic him. I think you're right, though. I think it's difficult to quantify this because it's so missing. It's not just like, I mean, something like The Smugglers, there are quite a lot of sort of, you know, set photographs and telesnaps and little fragments of censored footage, but also you know what it's going for because you've watched Dr. Sin, you've seen sort of pirates and smuggler things, Jamaica Inn.
Yeah.
You know what Power of the Daleks would roughly be like because it's got Daleks in it, and you know what Daleks look like, and there are telesnaps. Here it's just 2 sets of character actors having conversations. I'd be surprised if they animate this very quickly, because it would be a pain to animate, I would imagine, because of the number of speaking characters. But also, not a lot happens that tempts me. Not enough strikes up the imagination. This is probably the least imagination striking Doctor Who there is currently, I think. There's no hook, but the hook might be, if it's ever recovered, the hook might scream out at you. A bit like Enemy of the World. Once it was recovered, there was, there were things to enjoy in it.
Maybe that is the case.
I did watch this I didn't. I watched it in 2 parts, but I didn't begrudge watching it.
No, I don't think it's terrible, but it's like you say, there's nothing to really lift it up with the very best of the 60s stuff.
And it's definitely a hurdle to get over if you're doing a Doctor Who marathon run through, I think. But you've got some attractive things on the other side, and you've got quite a fun story on the other side, depending on what you thought of the gunfighters. And I quite like the gunfighters, so you're pushed over by the gunfighters, and you're drawn in by the war machines, which I'm not a huge fan of, but at least the war machines at least it exists. So, and it's extraordinary.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary this doesn't exist, because you've got quite a lot existing around this point.
Yeah,
this does feel like the most missing story of all the stories we've watched. There've been, episode 3's missing, or episode 2 and 4 are still in the archive, and I'm probably, guilty of forgetting something really obvious that I watched about 3 weeks ago. But it certainly feels like this is the most absent of all the stories.
And that's why it's quite commendable that you've got this far watching it, because after this I mean, there are still missing stories, but they're all more watchable. I think it's kind of.
We did have a bit of a
downhill from
wobble with the Celestial Toymaker. That was yeah.
What was your opinions on the Celestial Toymaker? I mean, it's awful, isn't it?
Well, I think I used the
fun.
word arse piss, didn't I?
I mean, the Celestial Toymaker has had the biggest journey ever in fan opinion, I think, because it was considered this.
I mean, when it starts out as all-time classic, there's only really one way for it to go from there, isn't there?
But all-time classic just based on the memories, I guess, and then you know, it hasn't recovered. I mean, there's just it's
if you think about the journey that maybe the Five Doctors has been on, it was like people loved it as soon as it was on telly. They loved it in the polls throughout the 90s. I don't read Doctor Who magazine anymore, so I don't know kind of where it sits in their most recent poll, but I imagine it's still got to be top 20. Whereas this story has been, you know, right up the top of the charts and presumably right down the bottom again. So you're right in that the Toymaker has kind of, you know, really run the gauntlet of differing opinions over the intervening decades.
Whereas
the Savages
just wouldn't fluctuate because nobody can really have an opinion. It's not memorable enough for old school fans to like reminisce about. I mean, even Jeremy Bentham in the Celebration, he's kind of, you know, he obviously can't remember it, so he doesn't, and it's eclipsed by his complete hatred towards the gunfighters. So, welcome to a non-entity.
I feel as well that had I had it to hand, I would have loved to have read the novelisation of this story, because I imagine Ian Stuart-Black wrote it in the late 80s or mid 80s. So by the time he was writing it, he would have known the story was probably gone forever. He'd written out a companion, so there was probably a lot of revising to do and a certain upweighting of that whole plot strand. And maybe it would have somehow been a really good book.
I like to think he opens. I haven't read it. He opens the book with the words, "The giant spacecraft moves across the sky, much like the one in Star Wars, towards the really realistic planet. Excitedly, the laser weapons heat up on the giant, exciting spacecraft. Meanwhile, down on the planet."
Down on the planet, which was really well realised.
Yes,
a group of racially sensitive people.
Yes, definitely non-blacked up elders who are in no way looking blacked up are having a deep philosophical conversation that is interesting to everybody.
And there are no jokes about anyone being sucked off in the next 100 pages.
The Doctor wields his reactive device that may or may not oscillate with something that could be called a vibration, but not in this book.
Yes, what's that? It's it's the Black Mamba. What?
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure we've just sold at least 3 or 4 copies of the digital download of the book. So if you're listening, Penguin Random House, thank you very much.
I'm pretty sure once it's out of copyright, there's a room for fans to write novelizations of what they think the authors would want the story to be like. At this point, thousands of Daleks came over the volcano in a very realistic way and didn't look anything like Rolikin's toys at all. Ian and Barbara definitely having had sex on the couch. 8 grapes.
Oh, JR on your show is convinced that there was any kind of hanky-panky whatsoever between Ian and Barbara.
Yeah, but he has the imagination of a Presbyterian minister. He won't listen to this. It's fine. And if he does, it'll be in about 10 years' time when.
That's true. That's true.
When they get that far.
You're a safe distance away now.
Yeah, that's very true.
Do we have anything more that we want to elucidate on this particular story?
I have a problem with the space names that Ian Stuart-Black came up with for some of these people. And I mean, names like Chal and Jano, they're kind of like, yeah, whatever. But the word...
Did you find yourself a bit exhausted?
Do you know what? I've spent the last 3 days just randomly catching myself saying out loud, exhaust. Like, that's the worst, most terrible, half-assed, lame space alien name that I've ever come across in a life, I would say, devoted to poor science fiction. That is just inexcusably terrible.
But there's a character called Flower as well.
Yeah, that's fine.
But doesn't that stand out? And like, it's like having Jano, Center, Tor, Chal, Mike. It's just one name, Ian.
No, I mean, you can anticipate a group of savages would find its way into their nomenclature, but exhaust. I mean, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it's an unusual one.
I was quite struck actually just then when you were talking about the possibility of animating it again and what would make for a good animation. I'd rather see them do slip back than this.
Oh.
But to be honest, now I've thought of it, I really would like to see them do slip back. So I'll shut up.
Oh, well, that's the second time in about a week that I've had slip back come into the conversation.
That's spooky.
I don't really remember hearing it on the radio. Do you remember the Radio Times did that thing where they gave away Doctor Who CDs for a while, and you had all these audiobooks, and then they had like the Pescatons, and I think Slipback was one of those. So I've probably got it knocking around somewhere, but I don't think I've ever listened to it.
I used to love it.
I'm pretty sure I've got it on a tape with
Genesis.
Was it Genesis?
I had it on tape with Genesis when I was.
I thought you meant the Phil Collins Genesis.
Slipback was okay, but it was Eric Saywood being revolting.
It was Eric Saywood really, really satirising JNT, and once you know that, it's just irresistible to listen to. And I imagine that anyone animating it now would be informed by that and would sort of lose the battle not to go over the top in a really, really bad way. So I think that would be just glorious. And yeah, I think if they animate absolutely every story that's in need of it, this would, because we're struggling to talk about it. Imagine having to draw this thing. Oh.
Well, hopefully by the time they get round to it, they'll do a sort of motion capture, like Andy Serkis, a proper motion capture thing, so they can really go to town on it. And the problem is, I instinctively feel like this isn't going to be improved if it was recovered. It's one of those stories where I don't think it would be better with the pictures. I don't think it helps that there aren't pictures. I don't think it would look very good animated. I'm not sure the telesnaps really work for this one. So I'm struggling to.
So what you're saying is, Matt, if they turn this one up, you're just going to chuck the film print straight in the bin.
What I'm saying is, there must be a format. Maybe if they turned it into an opera or something, there must be a format where this works for me. And it doesn't quite. But there's nothing offensive. Well, apart from the blackface, there's nothing like. It's just bland, and I think that's
it's just there, isn't it?
That's possibly the biggest crime in Doctor Who is making a story that three middle-aged white guys can't talk about in the podcast for very long. I mean, if it was really bad, we could go on for 2 hours. If it's really good, we could go on for 2 hours. It's the ones that, it's all right. It was okay. That's where it really struggles, and that's why you got me in, because I can just waffle on.
Yep.
About that. Get another 10 seconds out of him there and we'll move on.
You have done an admirable job.
I think if they were, and I'm not seriously suggesting this, but if they were going to refilm it now, I think on a really good location, in some kind of plain somewhere with a valley, you could get a really good kind of nature documentary vibe out of the stunning photography if they shoot it somewhere that's kind of perfect. But I can't think of any other elements that could be sort of seriously sexed up.
I mean, to be honest, Ian, you talking about a plain with a valley, that was enough to really fire my imagination. I thought you were going to go if they filmed it in the Alps or if they filmed it in some extreme location. But no, it's just if they found, I don't know, a plain with a valley.
Well, I'm thinking, a nice bit
Devon.
of the Serengeti or something, and you've got this wonderful location filming.
If it was filmed in Clumpton.
Yeah. If they did it on the outskirts of, wherever John Nathan Turner lived, like most Doctor Who was when I was little.
Well, Ian Stuart-Black retired to Honiton, so maybe they should film it there.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh, well, Chris Barry retired to Banbury, which is close to where I live now.
Oh.
So there you go. Chris Barry, who also directed The Demons.
So you'd like to think that if he was in charge of the direction, there'd be something from that side of things that would make it more enjoyable. But I guess we won't know.
But for all we know, he might have invented the drone shot for this one, and it might be huge, great sweeping, like the Evil of the Daleks animation, where they animated one bit with a drone shot around the Victorian mansion and in through the doors. Maybe that actually happened in the Savages. Maybe the camera came swooping down off the cliffs and right into the TARDIS.
Maybe it was one long continuous shot, like in Birdman. Who knows?
Yeah.
On a more kind of serious, I guess, point, this story, if it's going to be remembered for anything, and let's be honest, it won't be. But if it is, it's going to be for getting rid of Stephen, who ultimately elects to stay behind at the end of the story and help reshape this nascent society in his own big head image. What did we think of that? How do we feel about losing Stephen? And was it given enough foreshadowing?
It's a bit of an unusual one because I don't know. It seems to be you get characters either get sort of returned back to their proper time and place, or something really horrible happens to them. They forget the Doctor, or they get killed off, or whatever. But this is they've basically marooned him on this planet in the middle of nowhere, and with very little chance of ever finding his way back off it again. So
it's the Mel Bush stratagem all over. Well, not all over again. This is the precedent, but
yes.
It's one of the tropes is that there is a small clutch of companions who just get dumped somewhere and sort of
like Susan.
Yeah,
well, Susan or Nissa is the one I'm thinking of.
Yeah,
who decides to stay on in a leper colony.
I'm going to stay on a leper ship.
Yeah, that'll go well.
I didn't get the impression Stephen was particularly happy with being volunteered. He was sort of volunteered out of embarrassment.
It almost felt like he was
no.
saying, Doctor, you don't think this is a good idea, do you? Please say no.
And you get
the Doctor's like, oh yes, you should definitely stay.
You get the idea that Peter Purves had read the script for the 10th planet and was sort of thinking, well, no, I could stay on a little bit. No, says William Hartnell, you have to leave.
Yes,
we all have to leave, but you're going first. Okay.
I mean,
well, hopefully Dodo gets written out in a nicer way.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure her exit will be, considered and nicely woven into the story and rendered in probably quite a, striking, upsetting sequence of an emotional farewell. We will discover that. But yeah, I think it was it. Sometimes when a companion leaves, it feels really organic, and sometimes it feels like, right, your contract's up, piss off. And this, sadly,
felt more like latter.
It's not quite as egregious as Leela and Andrid, but it does feel like, right, we've got 3 pages of script left, get rid of him, think of something. Yeah. And it's a shame because obviously a lot of people really like Stephen Taylor, and obviously William Hartnell did. And this does feel like kind of, breaking up the band.
I think you're a bit charitable saying a lot of the companions get sort of worthy exits. So,
some companions.
We've already started comparing this companion's departure to countless other ones where they just disappear. I mean, very few companions do get a worthy exit. There are probably there's probably a handful that don't just feel like the actors are reluctantly leaving. Like Adric gets a worthy departure, and Matthew Waterhouse should have been really happy with his departure, but just the actor didn't want to go.
Yeah, I mean, Susan got a nice little speech,
That's true. Yeah.
But this really does feel like one of the more perfunctory kind of exits. But I'm judging it as someone who hasn't seen the War Machines yet. So watch this space.
Or the faceless ones.
Spoilers. Anything else, or shall we?
No, that's my life
wrap it up and give it a score.
I think.
Yeah. I feel quite desiccated now.
I'm just going to lie down for half an hour.
Oh.
Yeah, let's lie down and just think about what you've done.
So let's wrap this up and give it a score. I'm going to come to Ian first.
Oh, good Lord. I hadn't even planned ahead for this moment. So, as we've said, it could be brilliant. It could be terrible. At the moment, we absolutely can't judge it. So, I can only give it a straight down the line 5 out of 10. A Schrodinger's score, if you will.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. Matthew?
I was going to give it a 5 out of 10, but now I'm thinking...
You can give it a 5 out of 10.
Now I'm thinking the biggest crime for Doctor Who is making something that you just don't want to see in any format. That's not good enough to watch or not bad enough to watch. Making something that is just bland.
Yeah.
And I think that's it. Even though we can't see it, and we don't have enough of it to make a judgment, I'm still making a judgment based on that. And I think it's got to be 4 out of 10.
Oh, okay. That's fair enough. Yeah, I don't know. I have a bit of a soft spot for this one. I think Freddie Yeager makes what could have been a very, very dull story into something more entertaining. But as you say, it's really hard to judge it because there's so little to go on. So I'm going to side with Ian and go with a 5.
Well, it's a barnstormer, isn't it?
Anyway, let's hear what you guys have to say about The Savages.
I've got mail.
Before we dip into the Twitter sphere and our Facebook feedback, we've had a bit more audio from our dear friend Andy Moore. So let's have a little listen to what he's sent in.
The Doctor is escorted to a vast walled city with sweeping arches and elegant columns constructed of pale stone. An elegant bearded man greets the Doctor with a warm smile.
You are welcome, welcome indeed. I am Jano, leader of the Council of Elders. These are my councillors. We have all known about you for a long time. Look, we have charted your voyages from galaxy to galaxy and age to age, but we never thought we would meet you face to face to be able to question you in person. Well, it's very kind of you to make me feel so welcome. Ask away, dear sir, ask away. Thank you, Doctor. Well, we wish to know more about this reacting vibrator. But surely you'd like to hear of the races I've encountered? The Daleks, perhaps? Zabe? Mechanites? We're really very interested in the vibrator thing. You know, I have some documents I think you might be interested to see. No, the reacting vibrator, please. Well, they are records of my travels. You might find them rather surprising, young man. Honestly, it's really only the vibrator we care about. But Azabi, surely you... Did they have one? Did they have one what? A reacting vibrator. Not to my knowledge, no. Well, there you go then. Not interested. If we had a reacting vibrator, perhaps we wouldn't be stealing life force from human beings, absorbing it into ourselves and leaving the victims almost dead. You're what? Oh, shit.
Well, Well, guys, what did you make of that? Stunned silence.
I mean, it makes me want to listen to the Savages again.
I wouldn't go that far, but
and actually, it wasn't far off our idea of Ian Stuart-Black, basically rewriting it to make it more interesting.
Well, there you go. Thank you, Andy, for that. So, I have heard from the lovely, delightful Brendan Jones from Flight Through Entirety. And Brendan has this to say: I really love it. Dodo gets to be clever and proactive in spite of Stephen. Frederick Jaeger is brilliant as Jano and Hartnell, and there's some real-world morality in play, linking in with colonialism, slavery, exploitation and classism. Imagine if Dodo still had her Liverpool accent, but was surrounded by RP-speaking people insisting nothing was wrong and everything was happy here. Wow. The concept that the Doctor's essence corrupts Jano and changes his mind is very forward-thinking, and Ian Stuart-Black would continue exploring mental control through his other stories for the series too. Would massively benefit from animation. Yeah, I don't think you can argue with very much of what he's got to say there. Thank you, Brendan. And we've also heard from Tony Cross at Lockster71. And Tony says, I think it is an interesting story idea and Dodo gets to be the smart one, even if everyone ignores her. But I think it's hard to judge being absent from the archive, especially as there's an awkward blackface possibility. Yeah, no, I think you've made a good point there, Tony. And we've heard from Dave Kitchen from the Doctor Who show, and he's at David_Kitchen_, and he has this to say: perhaps the most missing of all Doctor Who stories, of all classic Who, this is the one I'd be least confident of outlining the plot beats of, even if I know the main thrust of the story. Yeah, I think this could be a common thread in our feedback.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing that we've just talked about the Savages, and you're starting to flag, Mark. You're struggling to read. You're struggling I find myself struggling to care about. I'm not sure I like Doctor Who anymore after talking for an hour and 8 minutes on the Savages. I just feel like really drained and desiccated now.
Oh dear. Oh, well, maybe this bit of feedback from RetroTube will revive you.
Okay.
So we've heard from the RetroTube Archive TV podcast at retro_tube. This is Adam, and they say, this for me probably wins the prize for most obscure classic Doctor Who adventure. It's probably the most generic sounding title, and I don't think I've ever experienced it in any form, not even the Target novelisation. So a really helpful comment from me there. Yes, thank you, Adam. And lastly from me, we have heard from 7up on Twitter. That's at 7up6389. And they say, still primarily associate this with the rather striking photo published in the 60s book. Yeah, I think I've seen this in other reference books. It's the picture of Dodo in the corridor. She's looking quite aghast at something happening. And they go on to say, the telesnaps suggest some nice design and location work. And of course, anything realised by Christopher Barry is always of interest. Quite a soft spot for Raymond Jones's music too. Thank you very much for that. And Ian, who have you heard from?
So we've heard from Philip Edney at Edney Philip. I like what he's done there. He's sort of flipped his name around.
Yeah,
that's quite stylish. He says, this world has been explored well in a series of companion chronicles by Big Finish, starring Peter Purves. Although the motivation for Stephen's leaving isn't clear in the show. It's great that it has been developed well later. Stephen is finally given a backstory, a motivation, and role. World Enough and Time, at World Enough and Time Pod, say, I'd love to see this one recovered. That's controversial straight away. Definitely Dodo's finest hour. No bugger listens to her, and it has proper hard sci-fi feels. Which, you know, that's a take.
It just goes to show everyone has a favourite.
I just don't understand how you can watch the Gunfighters and then say that anything else is Dodo's finest hour. But but it is wonderful that everyone takes different things away from different stories. Otherwise, it'd be a really boring universe of identical podcasts. Speaking of which, the Crinoid podcast, so another podcaster, a very missing adventure and one I'd love to see. The surviving soundtrack is enjoyable and the telesnaps are intriguing. Interesting that the Doctor's reputation precedes him. Stephen gets a worthy exit, and Fred Yeager makes a good quasi-Hartnell. So again, disagreeing with what we thought, but in an entirely fair and valid way. It's great that people, have different opinions to me. They're wrong to have them, but it does make for a very interesting experience. Matt, who have you heard from?
I've heard from Isosceles Kramer, which is at Isos Kramer, and he said, I always wished they'd had a chance, and they could do it now, of the Doctor returning to the planet to find King Stephen ruling as an evil despot, although that's more of a grim, dark NA idea. But it sounds like Big Finish have already returned. Big Finish, even the Savages,
they don't miss a trick, do they?
They're mining for drama. Yeah. Extraordinary. And Tim at the Missing Episodes podcast, and that's at Doctor Who Podcasters. Oh, you said hey Tim, did you?
That's right.
Oh,
yes.
Hi Tim.
Hey Tim.
No, not you. Hi, hate Tim. Him.
Yeah, I did wonder if this was like a.
Sorry, shall I try again? Greetings, Timothy.
Yeah, I hate Tim. So this is one or two. It's always been somewhat intangible, hasn't it? But I would love to see it. Dodo's strongest story, literally too, smashing up the lab, along with the gunfighters. And Yeager's Hartnell sounds very good. 2 of 2. Perhaps we could blackmail Phil Morris into handing it over by planting Exorce's head in his bed. I thank you, he says. And he says, I thank you in one word right at the end. Yeah. And that's it. That's I think that's the only comments I've been... Oh, Hayden Gribble, at Hayden_Gribble, says, the what? Exclamation mark, question mark. I think that's an interrobang he uses at the end of his the what.
Well, thanks for that, Hayden.
Those are all the ones that you've entrusted me to read.
Thanks very much to everyone for your feedback. If you want to get in touch, we'll be listing all the ways over our end credits. So, Matthew, thank you once again for coming in and sitting through another classic episode of Doctor Who.
Yeah, thanks. So it's the Crotons next, is it? Or the Dominators?
I'll have to have a look and see which is the least favourite of the next season, and see if we can cram you in somewhere.
You're just going to wait till Underworld and give me that one.
Oh, now there's a thought. Yes, okay. While you're still here, would you like to give a little plug to what you've got going on?
So I'm still incarcerated on the Strangers in Space podcast, and now we're talking about music as well as film and television. Ooh. We're talking about there's a new music club strand. Which, given my complete lack of most mainstream musical knowledge, we've talked about the Smiths so far, Morrissey.
Okay, yeah.
Despite the fact I haven't heard any Morrissey tunes, and I think they've talked about some sort of electro-pop that appeals to Simon, so we're continuing to talk about that.
So you're going to be bringing the
nothing.
Wurzels or Mozart? Or?
They Might Be Giants, Jethro Tull.
Oh, maybe. Nice, yeah.
Folk rock, maybe some folk music.
Yeah. Chicory Tip.
Kristen Hirsch, Kate Rusby. So I've got my preferred music. It's just not based on because I'm a different generation. And we're also going to be reviewing the latest Doctor Who episodes as they come out. Although this will probably be released after they've all come out.
That'll be long gone by then.
So we have reviewed all the Doctor Who episodes, and we look forward to Russell T Davies returning. To produce.
Yeah, I was going to say, but it's really hard to be topical on a show because we release these so far after we record them.
We really do.
What are people's thoughts on the casting of Sylvester McCoy as the new Doctor?
I think it's great.
And Happy Easter.
Thank you so much, Matt, for coming back in again. We do appreciate you taking one for the team.
Yeah. I now have to replenish my life force. Let it build up again.
Yes, well, quite. So until next time when Doctor Who is required, I've been Mark.
I've been Ian.
I was Matt.
If you'd like to get in touch, you can email us at mailbagofrassilon@gmail.com. We're also on Twitter @TimeEndSpacePod, and you can also find us on Facebook. If you want to leave some audio feedback, there is a link in the show notes. You can use your phone or your computer and leave up to 60 seconds of feedback, or if you're listening via the Anchor website, you can click on the message button and leave your audio. We'd love to hear from you. And thank you to Momo Tempo for providing our theme music.